There will be a day when perhaps Russia understands that it has lost this war.
Do you mean that Finland has won the war?
Yes, definitely. I mean, for us, we call it a defense victory because we survived. Eventually, we should have Ukrainian EU membership and NATO membership. And when you join the EU, remember, life is not going to end. It's not going to be only green fields and flowers and peace signs and rainbows. It's a tough club.
Всім привіт! Сьогодні День Незалежності України і в Києві багато гостів, які, власне, приїхали підтримати нашу державу. І серед них Александр Стубб, це президент Фінляндії, який допомагає Україні у питанні війни та миру. І, звичайно, ми поговоримо про це, а також про наш європейський шлях. Alexander, good to see you here in Ukraine. And have you been in Kyiv 5 or how many times?
Yeah, well, quite a few times over the years, but since I became president, I think this is my fifth visit here. It was my first trip abroad when I became president on the 1st of March 2024. Came here in April. I always find it important to come to Kyiv and talk to people, talk to the president, to the administration, and to get a sense of what's going on. And of course, things are looking much better now than they were 2.5 years ago.
That's good to hear, because now we are preparing to a harsh winter. At least we have heard that prognosis. Does it coincide with your expectations?
Yeah, certainly. I think it's always, you kind of have to prepare for the worst in order to be able to be ready for it. And I think right now, if you look at the military side and the Ukrainian offensive, it's been very strong for about 8 to 9 months. And only if we look at the numbers of it in terms of basically eliminating 30 to 35,000 Russian troops per month, basically because you're able to have long-range hits into the core of Russian society, in other words, oil refineries in St. Petersburg or Moscow or Wildberry logistical centers, or actually Shahid factories. And all of these is an indication that Ukraine is doing much better, but that doesn't mean that winter is not coming. It will come, and it's one of the reasons that Finland is working a lot on energy supply, on electricity, on diesel engines, for instance, coming from a company called Wärtsilä. So we have to prepare for the worst. That's just how it goes.
I have to be clear that to my assessment and to assessment of Ukrainians, Putin does not count people. And the fact that 30,000 Russians are killed in action, he doesn't care.
Yeah, I think so. I think you're right. I mean, if you look at reasons for Putin to end, or Russia to end this war, economy will not be a reason, right? The Russian economy is doing badly, but that's not going to be a reason. Dead or wounded soldiers, that's not going to be a reason either, because we're already talking over 1 million, and it's not making a difference in Russia. But the thing that might make a difference is people turning against the war. And now we're seeing with what I call legitimate opinion polls, about 65% of Russians wanting to end the war. And why is that? Because Ukraine is hitting the oil refineries, and therefore we're seeing the rationing of petrol and gasoline and diesel. We're seeing high prices, etc., etc. And also the fact that they've had to close internet a couple of times. So yes, I think you're right. It's not going to be about dead soldiers. It's going to be about a threat to the regime. And then, of course, the big question is, will Russia mobilize? Because if Russia mobilizes 300,000 to 500,000 troops, that is going to have a direct impact on young men in St. Petersburg and Moscow.
And I believe they will. But do you think that there could be some revolt or, I don't know, uprising in Russia to start?
I'm a student of Russian history, but I don't pretend that I'll be able to predict the future. The only thing I can say is that Ukraine is doing politically, militarily, and financially much better than it did a year ago, let alone 2 or 3 years ago. And right now it's about numbers, and the numbers in my mind are on Ukraine's side, as painful as it at times is. I mean, I'm just fresh out of the commemoration of independence of Ukraine and the decoration posthumanly of soldiers who have lost their lives. It's a very moving moment. So the cost of the war, of course, we all understand is extremely high for Ukrainian society, but at the same time, it's a question of preserving your independence and your sovereignty and your identity.
Do you expect, you personally, knowing all the information, knowing all the intelligence, that the war can end or cease soon?
It's impossible to give it a date. I think we need to work pretty much on 3 tracks. Track number 1 is to continue to supply Ukraine with the necessary means for it to continue to conduct the war. And that's then, of course, financial. And right now, one of the key elements is air defense and especially Patriots. The second element is to continue the policy of sanctions, especially sanctioning the companies in Russia which provide components for, say, drones or missiles, so for the war industry. And then the third track is the negotiation track, where, you know, we see a lot of public negotiations, but there should be some negotiations happening in the background as well.
Is there some sign or some signs of readiness of Putin to start meaningful negotiations? I don't see them.
I mean, to give you a very blunt and direct answer, the answer is no. I mean, it's a very sort of classic Russian tactique. But eventually there will be a day when perhaps Russia understands that it has lost this war, or it will not achieve its strategic aims, and that is the time to work on it. So, you know, we work a lot with the Americans, of course, with our Ukrainian friends almost every day, and with Europeans to try to bring Russia to the negotiating table. But I can't give you a deadline for it, and that's why we need to prepare for a harsh winter.
And once negotiation starts, the role of Europe would be?
Well, I mean, I come from a small country, so I feel very strongly that I need to stay in the back office, right? So my job is to provide information from Ukraine to America, from America to Ukraine, and if there is a need for information to be provided to the Russians, I'm happy to do that as well. But I do feel that the Americans are in the lead on the negotiations. They provide the umbrella, but of course we cannot take decisions on Europe over Europe. So I try to work in the back office and engage with as many people as I can.
If you would be proposed with the position of negotiator, would you agree?
Well, I mean, it's first of all, it's a hypothetical question, so you can't answer it in that sense. Secondly, if that question were to be posed, I of course, but I think it will be a team of negotiators in that sense, and I'm happy to do a lot of the background work. I don't need any of the exposure to it.
Do you know why do we in Ukraine value your experience most?
Probably because it's so similar. You know, in 1939.
Absolutely.
Russia attacked us, and we, went through the winter war in very harsh conditions. But that was only 105 days, whereas you've been in war now for over 1,600 days with 4 harsh winters. And then, of course, we had the war of continuation. So for us, it was a fight for independence, sovereignty, and territorial integrity. And as I've said before, Finland retained its independence, unlike our Baltic friends at the time. They lost it. But we did lose a part of our sovereignty. We weren't as free as Ukraine will be after this war. So yeah, there is sort of an understanding of the history of Russian imperialism and therefore a very strong sympathy with the Ukrainians.
And do you see that there are some receipts or lessons that Ukraine can learn from your experience for that time?
Well, I think the only thing that comes to mind is a word in Finnish called sisu, S-I-S-U, and it's basically resilience and grit and grinding it out. And I see a lot of that in Ukrainian society today. When I talk to a lot of my Ukrainian friends, or if I talk to foreign ambassadors here, they just say that the Ukrainians are so cool, that how are they able to sustain this? That's about sisu and resilience. But other than that, you cannot really compare war over 80 years ago to modern warfare as we see it today. The thing that is quite similar, of course, is that if you look at the ratio of Russians versus ratio of Ukrainians, or ratio of Soviets versus ratio of Finns, the figures were quite similar at the end of the day. But I think in earnest, not only have you already won the war, but at the end of the day you will win the war. And that is linked to the theory of warfare. If a big aggressor tries to deny the independence, sovereignty, and full territorial integrity of a country, and that country survives it, then by definition it wins. That's why we in Finland talked about a defense victory at the end of the day.
So you mean that Finland has won the war?
Yes, definitely. I mean, for us, we call it a defense victory because we survived. We existed as a nation.
Despite
as
you
Finland.
lost territory.
Yeah, but wars are not an accounting exercise. And I'm not by any means suggesting that Ukraine should lose territory. There's so many different ways of dealing with this. But in our case, there was a peace agreement. And in that, we decided that, okay, this is how the borders are going to be drawn. But for Ukraine, I don't think it is going to be like that, and it doesn't have to be like that. And I'll just give you one example. Only in this year, Russia has gained roughly 900 square kilometers of territory in Donetsk and the eastern part, whereas Ukraine has regained or liberated 800,000 square kilometers. So we understand that this is now a war of attrition, and a war of attrition where, and sorry for being morbid, the killing ratio is 1 Ukrainian for 8 Russians. So it's not sustainable for Russia in the long run. And they know that, and it's just a question of when they come to admit it to themselves.
Are there some red lines that are unacceptable for Europe, for you as for external observer? I understand that it's for Ukraine to decide what.
Yeah,
but anyway.
I mean, Ukraine decides its own red lines, and we follow. We support.
But your red lines, don't you have yours?
Of course, Europe has red lines, and Europe's red lines are that there's no conversation about European security without Europe. That is the absolute starting point. And I think all Ukrainians need to have the mindset that we are on the same team, Ukraine and Europe, or Ukraine and Finland. And that's why I, for instance, think that eventually we should have Ukrainian EU membership and NATO membership. And I say this because I think the value base of Ukraine is in Europe. Russia tried to make Ukraine Russian, but Ukraine showed that it wants to be European. And not only that, it is in our interest because you have the largest military in Europe, because you have experience from modern warfare. So if in the beginning it felt like Europe must help Ukraine, now Europe needs to have the mindset that Ukraine is helping us and will help us in the long run as well when it comes to security.
Does it mean that also membership of Ukraine in the EU and NATO, I hope so, is also some kind of red line in future peace negotiations?
For me, definitely. I mean, there's no one else is going to decide about Ukraine's EU or NATO membership, no one else than EU members and NATO members. That is a sine qua non. Of course, Ukraine decides on it. I mean, but for me, again, Ukraine is European, so in that sense, it's clear.
And do you see us in Europe? Because
yes, I do. I'm an EU nerd, right? I've been doing this EU stuff since the early 1990s. I was excited when Finland joined in 1995. I was a young student. I was negotiating at the Ministry for Foreign Affairs on intergovernmental conferences, on the Amsterdam Treaty, on the Nice Treaty, on the Lisbon Treaty, etc., etc. I mean, the EU is my bread and butter. But my point is, be patient, because the EU is always slow. It's always going to be frustrating. You're going to be debating about which clusters to open and which not. At the end of the day, Ukraine will be a member of the European Union, and that is going to be the greatest outcome, I think, of this war.
And there is sooner than later, because now we have to move fast. Otherwise, it will end up in nowhere. The world is moving fast.
Yeah, I think, the window of opportunity is now, because my feeling is that, when the world order settles to some kind of a new form, then we'll start fighting over different kinds of things. So that's why I don't think the negotiation would have opened was it not for the war. I don't think anyone would be talking about Ukraine's NATO membership in earnest was it not for the war. So the window of opportunity is now, but all I'm trying to say is that be aware that there will be difficult moments in these negotiations. There are difficult moments for everyone. For Finland, it was about agriculture or the eastern part of Finland, which we're seeing here on the screen. But, for Ukraine, it's going to be about different things. Just be patient. The EU is not utopia. It's not perfect. And when you join the EU, remember, life is not going to end. It's not going to be only green fields and flowers and peace signs and rainbows. It's a tough club.
And the last thing, I've been at your meeting with President Zelensky in Ankara at the beginning, and you started that with saying that currently you see that it's NATO 32 plus Ukraine.
Yeah, that's my take. It's obviously I'm a new member, like Sweden, so we became the 31st and the 32nd. But to be honest, if we look at the whole idea of a more European NATO, means that we need all the possible military means in Europe. And then you don't have to be or have a PhD in military strategy to understand that. You look around and say, I want Ukraine in.
Do people in NATO understand that?
Most of us do. Most of us do. Don't worry, you'll be NATO members at the end of this.
Yeah. Thank you. І дякую, що додивилися це інтерв'ю. Лишайтеся на каналі Європейської правди. До побачення. Thank you very much.
Thank you.